Most people are wasting waiver claims on the wrong players after week one. The real league winners are still out there, and if you don't act now, you'll miss them. So today I'll show you the top 5 waiver wire targets that you need to add before week 2. By the way, I'm Joe. I've done over 1 billion views in sports over the last decade, but more importantly, I've helped thousands of people just like you win their fantasy league. But the way I structure these videos is always the same. First, I start every video with the top NFL news stories, and then I tell you why they matter for fantasy football so you're up to date, and I guess deliver some value right off the bat. And then I answer my 5 favorite YouTube comments from last week's video. That's just a way to reward some positivity and smart questions in every video. It's also an engagement hack for me because the more comments that I get, the more YouTube will boost this video to new viewers. And then we talk through today's one key topic, aka the reason that you click. The goal is always to deliver on every single click. So later in this video, I'm going to show you the 5 biggest priority waiver ads for week 2. Cool? Let's jump right into the news. The first thing that we need to talk about today is Drake London. So that shoulder sprain, right? Day to day, this is great news. Banged up his shoulder on Sunday. Day to day, early tests suggest that it's not too serious, but that he'll need some more evaluation this week. That means that there's still a chance that he suits up against the Vikings in week 2. If he's limited, though, could open the door for guys like Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney to get a little bit more looks in general. We like Darnell Mooney. Hopefully, we see a little bit more of him. Let's talk through George Kittle. That's one of the ones that was kind of a bummer because he started off this game so hot. Obviously, leaving this game with that hamstring issue. He is scheduled for an MRI. He's kind of dealt with some hamstring problems before, so that made me a little bit nervous when this one popped up. And he already caught 4 passes and a touchdown before this happened. But if he can't go, just a reminder that the Niners kind of don't really have a reliable replacement for Kittle. So we'll see what happens with this offense in general. But this is one that I'm going to be monitoring closely over the next few days. Let's talk about a center. Mark Andrews. This is the wrong link. Mark Andrews. Jake Andrews, not Mark Andrews. I got Ravens on the mind from yesterday. So if we talk through, like, if we're going to go through any sort of offensive line injury, in particular a center, it's one that's really going to affect 2 things. First, CJ Stroud's protection in general. The protection is already kind of an issue for Houston. And then the Texans' run blocking, again, already kind of an issue. So this is something that we're going to be kind of monitoring. Obviously, he was carted off with a foot injury, going to need some further testing. This is a pretty epic disaster for this offensive line if this ends up being something that holds him out for an extended period of time. So I'm downgrading all of these Houston guys pretty significantly across the board. This is a fun one, though. Emeka Egbuka in his NFL debut, 4 receptions, 76 yards, 2 TDs, and a game-winning TD. It's nice to see a guy that we talked about in almost every single video during the offseason have a really hot start. So kind of stole the show in his debut. So love to see him get in the end zone twice. Pretty epic start. Shows that Baker already trusts him in big moments. So really like that. Hope he continues to carve out a role alongside Mike Evans. So I think he's an immediate fantasy factor, which you guys knew if you get him watching all offseason. Aaron Rodgers had a day. 22 for 30, 244, 4 passing touchdowns in his debut against the Jets. So kind of interesting that he admitted after the game that it felt good to prove that he still got it after New York let him walk. For fantasy, it's interesting. Rodgers looks pretty locked in. This is one that I might have to eat some crow on, as I was pretty bearish on guys like DK Metcalf and the Steelers pass catchers as a whole. So I'm going to be monitoring this one as well, not ruling out that this was kind of just like a flash in the pan, but we will see. He looked revitalized and he looked good. So maybe it was a Jets problem last year and not as much of a Rodgers problem. We will see. A couple other small things that I wanted to talk through, and not small things in terms of players, but hopefully small things. So Brock Bowers looks like he's day to day with that knee injury, which is huge. And then also Xavier Worthy, considered day to day. It looks like he's planning to rehab and not get surgery on that dislocated shoulder. That would be obviously good for fantasy managers, but I think it's still one of those things that we're worried about a re-injury or re-aggravation. So some good news, I guess, initially, but Rappaport came out and said that Xavier Worthy, at least as of now, is looking to rehab versus surgery. So let's jump into some Q&A from the last video. There's a couple good ones that I wanted to talk through here. We did talk through Hollywood Brown pretty extensively on last week's video. So hopefully you guys were able to grab him because he's going to be significantly more expensive this week in terms of your fab. Let's jump in. There was a couple here that I already highlighted to talk through. Where's the first one? Okay. How much fab would you spend on Rashee Rice? So still staying on the theme of these Chiefs wide receivers. He's not going to be back until week 7. Honestly, Rice is still a target for me if someone was to drop him. I think he could be a league winner, especially if Worthy ends up being more hurt than we think, or like I said, he re-aggravates. I think 10 to 15% is totally reasonable for Rashee Rice. So that's kind of where I'd be at. I wouldn't be going all in, but definitely would try and grab him. What's your take on Hunter Renfrow in Carolina now? Yeah, he earned 6 targets in week 1, which certainly isn't nothing. Bryce Young missed him wide open on a throw that probably would have gone for a pretty long gain. But that being said, to me, he's still kind of a deep bench stash at best. Definitely not a must own for me. This one was kind of crazy. Wanted to flag it. Would you drop Herbert for McCarthy? No, not after a week 1 performance. We'll see what McCarthy does tonight, as the time of this recording is before Monday Night Football. We'll see the type of passing volume that we see in Minnesota, but Herbert looked great against Kansas City. So McCarthy's still got a lot to prove, but we'll see. We will see. Would you grab Hunter Henry or Cade Otton and start them? I have Goddard and Kincaid. Yeah, honestly, these players kind of seem like a wash to me, like in a vacuum at least. We've already seen what Cade Otton is. We've seen him kind of get lost in that offense before, so that's the concern for me. In the long haul, I definitely would lean Kincaid, best quarterback, highest team totals consistently, and then I would imagine more talent. So yeah, I think Kincaid slightly. There's another trade that yeah, here it is, trade. I traded Caleb Williams, Kamara, and Diggs for JD5 in a 12-team PPR league. What do y'all think? Still have Chase Brown, Hampton as my RB1 too. Got Justin Jefferson, JMO, Waddle. Yeah, there's. I mean, I think you lost some depth, but improving your starting lineup with Daniels over Williams is solid for sure. I'm always team if you can be consistently good on the waiver wire and make good trades. I'm always going to be okay with like these packages to improve your star power and improve your overall. I think just starting lineup is important early in the season for some of these deals, but if you can get them done, it definitely makes some sense. Yeah. That's all the questions I'm going to get to today. But if I didn't get to your question, now's a good time to remind you that I do have a membership community called the Fantasy Accelerator, where I do answer every question as well as give you everything you need to win your league. You can check it out, fantasyaccelerator.com, or hit the first link in the description. That'll bring you right to it. Also, still have my weekly top 150 rankings totally free at top150free.com. That's the exact list that I'm using to set my own lineup. So make sure you guys check that out. But let's get into today's one key topic. So 5 players that you need to add now in week 2. We got Hollywood Brown on the title. So we're going to talk about him for the second straight day, or second straight week, I should say. Quickly, some of the guys that we talked through: Trevor Lawrence, Adam Thielen, Hollywood Brown, Tootin. We were on the Jacksonville running game. Just didn't happen to be ETN last time. And then Hunter Henry, who had a decent game as well. But let's talk through 5 other players. Let's start with number 2, since he's on the thumbnail, so it's not really a secret. Let's start with Hollywood Brown. Marquise Hollywood Brown. So he's rostered in about 39% of leagues right now. So he's still available in far too many, in my opinion. So I had to put him on this list for a second straight week. We will see what happens with Worthy, but I would still say that this has to be still a pretty big priority for us. Still getting used to the whiteboard here. There we go. So I think the first thing that we have to kind of just like acknowledge at the very least is that he's basically the wide receiver 1 by default right now. The target share was completely insane, right? But Rashee Rice suspended, as we know. Xavier Worthy still sidelined. So basically, the Mahomes #1 option. 16 targets in week 1. 16. It's a crazy number. Caught 10 of them for 99 yards. The Chiefs ranked top 5 in pace and pass rate over expectation. So we still see that there's going to be a decent amount of volume here, which is what matters. But really, just like he's kind of the target hog in this offense right now, with Kelsey really not being able to step up so far. That's the big thing. So 26% targets per route run with Mahomes and Rice off the field, which is definitely something that we want to keep in mind. 19.9 fantasy points in week one. So even if he's not efficient, I think the sheer volume kind of makes him a fantasy starter for at least the foreseeable future. So volume meets fast track. And like what I mean by that is the Chiefs pass rate 64%. And I think that's in general. So like if he's going to continue to get this type of target share and they're just going to throw it this high of a rate, they're also running a ton of plays, eighth most offensive plays last season. So I'm in on just like having shares of this offense, and this is one of the ones that I'd be the most excited about for sure on the waiver wire. If he ends up being the KC wide receiver for a month, um, that ends up being like a super valuable asset, right? So the basically the cheapest wide receiver one stretch that you're ever going to see in Kansas City. So I think that if you wanted to kind of spend again like 15% of your budget on this, if he can really help your starting roster, I think is totally fine. And he might still end up being a guy that has a role even when these guys return. It was interesting because even towards the end of last season, he was running a ton of routes. He wasn't as involved as we would have liked to have seen coming off that injury and going into the playoffs, but they're trying to find a way to get him involved. They brought him back, all of that, right? So I'm bullish in general. Let's talk about the first player here on this list, Danny Dimes. Danny Dimes is in 4.9% of rosters right now. So not a lot of people believed in him. Not a lot of people believed in him. So I think the thing that stands out about just the Colts in general that maybe wasn't talked about enough in the offseason, myself included, was that this is a really up-tempo team. They're going to run a ton of plays. So Shane Steichen's offense ranked top 5 in neutral pace, top 3 in combined plays last year. So I think just in general, we need to keep them, I guess, give them a shot to kind of keep that pace going. And more plays just means more chances for fantasy points and kind of like just a hidden vol. I think just like the volume is underrated here. And quarterback, it's still we want to kind of focus on efficiency where we can, but volume still matters for sure. And I guess week one was kind of a surprise, right? I mean, this is a guy that was kind of left for dead last year, was on the practice squad for the Vikings for a little bit. But I think no one probably saw 272 passing yards and 3 TDs coming in that Colts debut. So he was the QB2 overall, which is absolutely crazy. But the thing that I think we should talk about was 26 rushing yards, but 2 rushing TDs on the ground. So he's always kind of been like a more of a dual threat than people give him credit for. It wasn't like empty volume, in my opinion. 22 of 29, so consistently moving the offense down the field. I think if anything, he proves that he can be a stable option and give you a decent floor in fantasy. I think he's a floor guy. I don't necessarily think he's a massive ceiling guy. And I think it's going to be one of those ones where he's very matchup dependent. If he can keep Pittman, Downs, Warren like viable, I think that's great. But I think the question is, was this just like a hot start? And can he do it in tougher matchups? So this is one where if you really need a quarterback, by all means grab him. But it's a really tough matchup this week against Denver. So I wouldn't expect a ton. I certainly wouldn't expect it to be like um, just like what we saw in week one. But Denver is probably one of the best defenses in the league. So even if you happen to miss on him, he's not someone that I'm going crazy on in terms of a fab perspective. But I just wanted to throw him up here as like one of the guys that we should be definitely monitoring because he has like top 10 upside for sure in fantasy. And if you ended up taking a really late quarterback that doesn't pan out, he's another one of those guys that can at least um, he can contribute to your roster. In terms of contributors, we're always trying to find tight ends on the waiver wire that are feasible, right? Let's talk about Juwan Johnson. Nice game for Juwan Johnson in week one. 1.2% of rosters. So he led the team in week one, 8 of 11 targets. And 76 yards for a tight end, it's not nothing. So more than any Saints wide receiver in week one. And for me, it's like he wasn't just involved, he led the offense in receptions and yards, proving that he's basically in Spencer Rattler's circle of trust. So I think that it's just the trust factor there for Rattler. And that stuff matters for these young quarterbacks, right? So I think it's really just like the longest play of this was a 21-year-old pass or year old 21 yard pass. So it wasn't like you were getting like big chunks or anything like that outside of that, but that was the team's longest play of the day. So what we might get from Rattler is kind of these dink and dunk type of plays up the field. And the tight end seems to be one of those guys that he feels super comfortable throwing to. So I think that, like, in a shaky quarterback situation, chemistry, trust, all of those things, like, at the very least, you want it to be the safety valve. So I like it. And the Saints, like, obviously, they're not a great team, but they do have the second easiest pass schedule. So there's going to be some kind of cupcake matchups here that having a tight end that can be this involved in good matchups is interesting to me. So at a position where tight end is kind of just terrible, I actually don't think that this is the worst ad that you can make. I think he's like already firmly in kind of like streamer territory. So with the Saints investing $30 million in him, more dialing up some plays, I think there's like, I guess the question is he a must add? Maybe depending on your roster, but is he rostered on far too few teams at 1.2%? Absolutely. Another guy that's 1% owned right now in fantasy that we should talk about, Kayshon Boutte. Let's talk about Kayshon Boutte. So, getting excited about a Patriots wide receiver isn't the easiest thing to do right now, but the passing volume seems to be back under Josh McDaniels. So, I think that's the big thing. So, it's really just the pass volume is on the way up in comparison to what we've seen over the last few years. So more volume, more guys like or more guys like Boutte that actually can be feasible, I guess, from a volume perspective. I would say like let's talk about the usage for a second, like borderline breakout usage that we didn't really see coming. So he led the team in routes, 44 routes. He had 8 targets, 6 receptions, over 100 yards in week one. That's wide receiver one usage. On, I guess, a roster spot that a lot of people didn't even think he might keep for this team. So I think what we were looking at here, though, is kind of an explosive role. So not necessarily just like those safe targets. I don't think he's necessarily just a filler, though. 22.6% of his routes were go routes. So we're looking for some big plays. And that's kind of what we want from these type of ads, right? We want guys that can actually we can put into our roster if we actually get in an issue and can break something wide open for us, right? So it's kind of what New England lacked last year too, the fewest 15 plus yard plays in the NFL. I guess the question becomes, is he a hidden gem, or is this going to kind of just be a frustrating wide receiver room? So Stephon Diggs, Kyle Williams, Pop Douglas, those were the guys that were expected to dominate targets. But are there any other young wide receivers that can make some noise? We'll see. He's already kind of forcing his way into the rotation, so we like to see that. But he does feel like one of those guys that should be rostered. Just to wait and see. If we like Drake May to emerge this year as kind of a potential breakout in year two, he's going to bring someone unexpected along for the ride. So maybe it's Boutte. One that we've been waiting for a long time is the last guy that we're going to talk about today. So talk about the complete opposite. He's the guy that was drafted high in a good offense, tied to a good quarterback, who just can't seem to come down to the ball with the ball when it matters, but happened to score a few more touchdowns than we expected last year. So he had a terrible rookie year, one of the best rookies that, or one of the worst rookies, I believe, that Matt Harmon's ever charted in reception perception. So that's something that I always kind of look back at. But then we start to see like they draft a stud last year. And is that it for Quentin Johnston? I guess we proved that that wasn't, at least to start the year. Really interesting. 5 catches, 79 yards, 2 touchdowns on 7 targets for Quentin Johnston. So are we fully back on Quentin Johnston now? Are we fully back? 2 TDs. So 7, 5. Wow, that's really bad. Sometimes the handwriting is too bad. 5 for 79 and 2. But despite the 24.9 fantasy points right out of the gates, it's really just him showing ceiling, which is something that we needed to see from him, right? So I think the ceiling is kind of the takeaway on that first nugget. The second nugget is really just locked in roll. No matter what they do, they still trot him out there. He was out there even more than Keenan Allen, which was interesting. So route participation is something that I think we can't take for granted. The second most routes. So there was a part of me that thought we might just see Keenan Allen come in here and take over a lot of these extra roles or extra routes, I should say, in 3 wide receiver sets. But we didn't really see that. So there's definitely a role here. And it's really just this depth chart. Like, what do we think about his security in it? And to me, I think his security is pretty solid. Obviously, the beat writers expect Lad McConkey to absolutely dominate targets, but Johnson projects as the clear wide receiver too, I think. And I think what probably didn't get talked about enough was Palmer's exit. We've talked about Palmer a decent amount over the offseason as being like a really strong player in terms of like beating man coverage. So we're going to have to see someone step up in that regard. My thought was that it might be Keenan Allen in man coverage, but maybe it ends up being Quentin Johnson. We'll see. I think his place in the rotation is almost like arguably safer than it was last year, despite kind of what we've seen in the lead up. So I guess the question is it finally the year? He has the draft pedigree, he has the team buy-in, and now he's shown a little bit of the ceiling, right? So at 3.6% rostered, I think he's someone that you can stash right now as a high upside waiver ad before week 2. And I think he's one of those guys that needs to be prioritized. So make sure you guys hit subscribe, leave a comment down below if you want me to answer it on the next one. We'll talk to you guys soon.